-5. That's good. 2, nice. 1. That's good. Okay, yeah. So we have a good range.
1, 2, 1. That's good. Seems like people are joining in. We have 17 folks.
Yeah, we'll wait like a minute and then get started right after. Just as a note, Gordon, did you already start the live stream? Cool. Yeah. So just as a note, we are live streaming this onto YouTube, and this recording will be made available on YouTube as well. The slides as well, any of the content that's in this, we will be sharing it in our Discord, and the slides will be available if you ever want to come back to them to read over them. But yeah, it's a pretty simple workshop. We're just waiting in for more people to join. 17 people. But yeah, it's 6:05. So why don't you just get started now, and then as people join in, they can just follow up with the content. So with that, welcome everyone. This is our first workshop under GTSC McMaster U. We wanted to start with something a little bit more beginner friendly to the intermediate level, which is Git and GitHub Bootcamp. It's a very core concept. I'm sure you've all heard about the term Git and GitHub. If you guys are in engineering and more interested towards software, computer, electrical, any of those streams, it's a very core concept. So it's something that you need to know earlier on so that when you find your first co-op or start working on your personal projects, it's something that I'm sure you guys will use. With that being said, your speakers for this event is going to be me, Shashank Suresh. I'm one of 4 workshops and talks lead. We also have Omar, who's the other workshops and talks lead, and Gordon's helping us with recording the presentation for today. So why don't we just jump right in? So what is GitHub? I'm sure you guys would have heard the term before. You guys might have even seen this logo around at different hackathons or just online. But GitHub is known to be one of the most popular version control tools. Version control is basically nothing but just having a way to manage your code. So say you're working on a personal project and say you want to build an app or something that's solving some sort of problem. You start working on your preliminary code, you complete maybe 100 lines of code, and you just have that stored on your computer. The next day you get back to it, you start working on it a little bit more, you add a couple more lines of code, and so on and so forth. And over a week, say you've added around 500 lines of code with like 3 different features, but all of a sudden you feel like 1 or 2 of those features aren't really needed, and you want to revert changes back to the first stage that you wrote on the very first day. You don't want to go through and comb through all of the code to find exactly what changes you made over the past week. You'd rather have a point where you can create a check mark or a checkpoint and go back to that checkpoint with the click of a button or a couple lines of code. And that's exactly what GitHub allows you to do. You get to create these markers in time with your code where you're able to revert back to that change with just a few lines or just a click of a button, and you're able to come back to that setting in time. And that's what version control, the idea of version control really is. So Git is used for anything related to code control, from personal projects. When you're completing personal projects for, say, your resume or applying to internships, you probably want a couple of personal projects under your belt, and GitHub is a good source to store all of these project code bases. You can also use it for a lot of club projects. So if you guys are a part of McMaster Marge Over team, or if you're part of EcoCar and you have some software tasks to do on there, it's a really good idea to create a GitHub repo and store all the code there. And it's also used in enterprise level code bases. So if you're working for big tech companies or startups or any of those, they will use some sort of version control if they're a software related company. There's plenty of alternatives used in the industry, such as Bitbucket, GitLab, GitKraken. These are all very similar to Git and use Git to actually run this tool. There are other types of version control tools such as SVN, Perforce, and other types of version control that we won't get into. We're going to be focusing on only Git this workshop. So another good thing about GitHub is it's more than just code on a website. You have a bigger community, which is why it's more widely known across the world for anything related to personal projects to enterprise level, because you're able to connect with a lot more people about code. So we're going to jump into a little walkthrough of the website in general. I'm sure some of you guys might have seen it, and some of you guys might not have seen it ever. So if you want to follow along, create your website, I can help with that. But let me just sign out and just show the home page. So if you go to github.com, this is the home page that you're greeted with. It changes over time. And if you've never made an account before, just click on sign up. They have this little cool space theme going on right now that you can make an account with. Just enter your email, password, username, those kinds of credentials, and it'll create an account for you. I already have that, so I'm going to sign in. And once you sign in, you're introduced with a bunch of tiles on your screen and a bunch of tabs. If you're a first-time user, I'm sure this would be kind of confusing because there's a lot of information coming to you. But we're going to take some time to just go over the entire homepage and then dive into what repositories and stuff are. So on the left-hand side, this navigation bar right here, this is your user, where you can navigate through different users and organizations. These are where your repositories are. It's a quick select for repositories. Say you want to jump to a specific repository, they'll show up here. You can also search for them here. Recent activity is anything that you've done on GitHub recently. This would show up here. And teams would show up here. We won't really go into teams too much today. That's a little more advanced topic, but say you're part of EcoCar or something, there will be a team created by one of your leads, and they would add you to that team, basically, where you're able to work together collaboratively to see other people's code as well as your code. When you're first greeted, another thing is there's usually a tutorial that pops up. You can skip that for now, and it would be available in this tile right here. So you can start it back up from here, where you can just read the guide. It'll take you to the GitHub documentations, and you can go over the entire presentation from there, or tutorial from there. Then over here is your Readme section. This is a pretty cool section that has been recently added, I think, just last year or 2 years ago, but this is basically the section where you get to talk about yourself and talk about who you are. So a lot of people in this section add personal interests related to tech, or even if it's not related to tech, they add some hobbies and stuff that they're interested in. This is a pretty cool section. Let me show you guys some examples of what other people have done with this section. So this is someone's Readme file from that section. They made a little interface where they're able to connect over LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, GitHub. They talk about fun facts about themselves. Then you have this person who has sort of just how many people have visited their profile, a little about me section. They also highlight what they're proficient in. And finally, this is another way where they have actual code to talk about who they are, their company, their position, what languages they're proficient with, and what their goal is. So this GitHub About Me section is quite essential in any profile, because say you're attaching your GitHub profile link in your resume or in your LinkedIn page or anything, this is what whoever clicks on that link is greeted with first. So it's a pretty important section where they're able to connect with you better rather than just seeing a bunch of code and stuff like that. We do have a video on our YouTube channel talking about how to create something very artistic and creative. It's called Creating an Effective GitHub Portfolio. So if you're interested, please do check that out after this. So coming back to GitHub and the GitHub website in general, over here we have 4 different tabs. Pull requests. So pull request is nothing but pull requests for your entire all your projects. This is not specific to any repository. It's in general to every repository that you're working with right now. Then you have issues. So issues are basically someone can raise a ticket for any of the repositories that you're working with collaboratively or are public. They can raise a issue ticket with that and say, hey, like I found this bug. Is there a solution? And you can come back and look at that issue and find a solution for that issue that someone created. Then you have Marketplace over here. So Marketplace, of course, as the name suggests, is basically like a shop. It has some pretty cool applications that you can integrate into your GitHub account or any projects that you're working in. There's stuff where you get to see like your code efficiencies, test out whether you're writing the right syntax. It can correct syntax for you. There's applications to help with that. It's just general tools to make your life easier, basically. And then finally, you have an explore section. And this explore section is basically a bunch of GitHub users that are talking about some cool things that you're working with. It's a good place to connect with different people if you're interested, say with ML or you're interested in cloud. You can just search someone up, find that person's like repository or something, find something cool, connect with them, talk to them about it. It's just a cool section where you get to meet some new people in the GitHub community that I talked about earlier. With that being said, going back to our slides, let's go to creating our first repository. So when you're here, I forgot to talk about this section right here on the website, but this is just your notification center. Say someone's talking about a repository, someone has questions, someone's created a pull request or anything, that will show up right here. This plus icon is where you can create a new repository, import repository, new gist, organization, or project. Today, we're just going to focus on new repository and how to create a repository. And then this little profile icon drop down here is where you can actually go to your settings center and stuff like that. So click on this plus icon, new repository. For this one, you don't really have to create a repository, new repository. We do have a repository that we've created for you guys to follow along with that Omar will talk about right after I'm done. So right here, when you first create a new repository, you can change the owner of the repository. So it can either be under an organization that you're working with, or it can be yourself. Here you would just put a name for the repository, test repo DSC. A description can be added for this repository. It is an optional field, but I do highly suggest that you do include a description, because if you have a bunch of repositories, it's just an easier way to keep track of what's going on. Then you can set it to either public or private. Public just means anyone can access it. Private, of course, only you can look at it. It would show up on your GitHub account as a private repository, but people wouldn't be able to see the contents of the repository or be able to see what you're working on. Then you can initialize the repository with 3 different things. One being a Readme file. A Readme file is pretty important for any repository. I would always suggest adding a Readme file at the start. I will show you what it is. It's just a markdown of explaining different things about the repository. But for now, a Readme file is just sort of the description tab for what people are greeted with when they click on your repository. Then you can have a .ignore file or .git ignore file. A .git ignore file is just a file where, say there's certain packages and redundant files that you want to make sure that every time you're making a commit or pushing code into GitHub, you don't want those files repeated. You include a .git ignore file, and every time you make that commit, GitHub will go through your commit code commit and be like, hey, like this file is in the security conditionals XYZ is in the .git ignore file. I'm going to skip this and not include it in the commit, because you don't want anyone having access to security credentials and those kinds of things in your code. Finally, you have choose a license. So license is basically just more concerns with like legality and stuff like that. Say you're working on an actual application that you want to commercialize, and so you're making that code where people can access it, they're just not allowed to sell or make profit off the code that you've written. Then you would choose a license. There should be a license option that's available under one of these, and you say like, okay, like you guys can use my code. It is open source, but you just can't use it to sell. And there would be a license explaining those kinds of details. So let's not click this, create a repository, Readme file. This is exactly what we've done through. You just click create repository and it would create this file or this repository. So again, this is under your user. This is the repository name. This right here is any of the code or files that you attach. So you have like a Python file, a JavaScript file, those would all show up here with a little message right beside it. This right here is the Readme file that I talked about. So this is basically the home page of the repository. Whenever someone clicks on a repository, it's always the readme.md file that comes up first. You'd basically be like, I see some questions there. I'll answer that right after. But on this website, once you see the readme.md file, it basically contains information about the repository. So say you're creating an application where the user has to download it onto their desktop and complete a couple steps, you basically create the instructions page on the Readme file and include any details that you think is important to the repository. So issues, again, like we talked about here, if people have issues with your repository or you want to create like a note of an issue that you saw with your code, you can create it here. This issues is different to this issues only in the sense that this is specific to this repository alone. Pull request is the same thing here. Pull request here is for all projects in general that you're working with. Pull request here is just for this repository alone. It's just a way for before you merge your code, you just want to review it, make sure that the change doesn't break anything that you're working on. You can sort of just make sure that review the code here and then create a merge so that the code is elegant in the sense. Then you have GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions just help with the workflow for your project. This is a little more advanced. You wouldn't really use it too much for your personal projects and stuff, but it is an option that's available when you're considering making your code a lot more user-friendly overall. Then your projects. So say you're working on a bunch of repositories and they're all connected to one single project. You can just click on this, create a project, and then attach all those repositories to that project. So projects, in a sense, is more higher level compared to repositories. I know the terms can be confusing because personal projects are usually repositories, but say you have one big project and you have 3 different repositories that are under that project, that would basically be the hierarchy. Then you have a wiki page. So a wiki page is similar to the README that we saw earlier. README, of course, is just a short description of the repository, and a wiki basically goes into more in-depth detail about the repository in general. Then you have the security tab here. Of course, security is a little bit more advanced as well. You can basically talk about any security policy if you want to enforce any sort of like restrictions and stuff like that. That would be detailed out in here. Then finally, you have insights. So insights is just more of like an analytical tab where you get to see who's coming and checking out your code, how many people have made an issue ticket, how many people have like managed pull requests or open pull requests, stuff like that. And then finally, you have the settings tab where you're able to actually just look over your entire repository. Say you want to change your repository from public to private, then you change it here. If you want to make implement GitHub pages into it, then you go into this settings tab and create a GitHub pages if you're making a website, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's everything about repositories and the tabs that are up here. With that being said, I think Omar will be taking over for the rest of this presentation to talk about different Git commands.
All right, so thanks for the overview of GitHub Shashank. I will share my screen now. All right, is everyone able to see the screen? All right, so we're gonna delve into Git, and before we do that, I would like to explain what Git is and differentiate it from GitHub. So GitHub is an implementation of Git. There's many implementations of Git. You might have heard of some of them. So one of the more common ones is Bitbucket. So GitHub is built on top of Git, and we're going to talk about Git now. And just an intro to version control in general, if you're not familiar with it. We are going to go through, actually just, all right. You guys see it? All right. So let's say Bob and Sam are construction workers, and they're tasked with making a house. And they have a base that they start off with 4 walls. As you can see here, it looks like a box, but let's just imagine this is 4 walls of a house, right? And their boss wants features in the house. So the boss wants windows for the house and doors for the house. And if Bob and Sam were good construction workers, they would use source control. Not really, but let's just imagine that they would, right? So Bob is tasked with adding windows and Sam is tasked with adding doors. So forgive my handwriting and the doodles and stuff like that, but hopefully it gets the point across. So what Bob and Sam do is they take a copy of the base, which is our master branch. They both take a copy of it to work on it on their own time and develop it independently. So Bob branches out from master, which is our 4 walls, and they have a branch called house/windows. So usually this is how we name branches in real life as well. Master/feature name. That's a pretty common naming technique. And Sam takes with him house/doors. They both take a copy of the master branch, right? So Bob works on Windows, right? So Let's just say Bob works on Windows. He creates this nice design, and it ends up looking like this over here. And Bob is done for the day, right? So once Bob is done working for the day, they commit their changes to house/Windows. So they commit changes to their specific branch. And the important thing to note here is that once they commit changes to house/Windows, it's like a checkpoint. So let's just say they do work the next day and they don't end up liking it, right? Just like a video game, they always do checkpoints and save games and stuff like that. It's similar, right? So let's say your save game just your latest save game cripples and you can go back to the previous one it's saved, right? So you don't have to restart the entire process. It's essentially the same thing over here. And the important thing to note is when they commit to the branch called house/Windows, master remains the same the entire time. Master does not change at all, right? And the next day they do some more changes, right? They add some nice features and designs to the windows and they do a new commit, a new checkpoint, right? For that day. They could do it as many times as they want. They could do it multiple times a day, multiple times in hours, right? That's not relevant here though. And on the side, Sam is working on doors, right? And when he's done for the day, he does the same things. He commits his changes, this door that he's created for the house. They create their own checkpoint. And the next day, let's just say they add a design to the door, a color, and they commit that change. And then 10 days later, they're both done with their work and the boss approves their work, right? So what they want to do is they want to merge all of their changes into the master branch, which is the four walls in the beginning. So they just want to merge all their changes into master, right? The master branch. So Sam merges his commits from house/doors, which was his branch, into master. And now that they've merged it, this is what master looks like. So master now has a blue door, right? But Bob also wants to merge his windows. Now, you can unmute for this. Do you guys see a problem with this? So this is what master looks like now. And this is, over here, we have Bob's windows. Does anyone see a problem?
The window and the door might overlap.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, so they can't merge it, right? They can't. That's not possible. Otherwise, they would end up with a weird design: the house and a window, and a house and a door combined, right? So what happens here is that Sam and Bob need to communicate to fix this conflict/issue. This is what we call a merge conflict, right? So what they do is they work it out. They agree to remove the window near the door, the conflicting area, right? And eventually what happens is that they both end up merging their changes after fixing the conflicts. And this is what they end up with. So master now has a door and a window, and now their design is what we call feature complete, right? And this is exactly what this diagram shows in a more softer perspective. So the blue line here is our master branch, and these green lines that are branching out from the blue line, they're branches, right? So feature one, feature two, they develop in their own time, and when it's time to merge them, they get merged into the blue line, which is our master, right? So did that make sense to everybody? If you have any questions, you can always unmute and ask a question. Did that make sense to everybody? I guess it did. That's great. So for the next part of this thing, what we would want is your so we listed that you should create a GitHub account. Can we make a new branch from a branch? Yes, you can. So all right, so let's just say feature one, right? We have feature one here. Thanks for the cool background thing. All right, so feature one, right? And let's say you want to create a feature that uses feature one as a prerequisite. Let me just try drawing here. So what you would get is another branch, and we will call this feature. I'm trying to draw using a mouse. Feature 1.1. And let's just say feature one got extended over here. We would merge this over here. So now feature 1.1 is in feature 1, and then this would eventually get merged to our master branch. Does that make sense, Jayesh? All right, cool. So for the next part, we would like to have your email. So this part is going to be a little interactive, and if you would like to participate, we would want to add you to our GitHub repository. So if you could drop your GitHub emails in the chat, we could add you so you can participate along. And yeah, if anyone wishes to participate, they can just drop their GitHub email in the chat right now, and we'll add you. All right, just give me a couple minutes here. I will add everyone who sent their email. All right, so. You can use this opportunity to ask questions because this will probably take a few minutes, just adding everybody. You guys should be getting emails as an invitation. It seems like everybody wants to do this, and that's great. All right, I believe that is everybody. Everybody who posted their email should have an email in their inbox. And if you do not have one, please let me know so I can make sure that you're here. A few people have pending invites, so. All right, so while everyone is accepting their invites, what we'll do is we'll install, so there's a GitHub application called GitHub Desktop. We're not going to use this today. So this is great if you're already familiar with Git and how it works in the background, but this is probably left for more advanced users. So we're going to try to learn Git from the bare bone basics, and we're going to use command line, everyone's favorite. All right, so I will paste this link in chat. So let's head over to this link. I just pasted this in chat. If we open this link, what we want to do here is everyone's probably running 64-bit Windows, so we're just going to download 64-bit Git for Windows setup. You guys can go ahead and save it. I already have it downloaded, so I will just pull it up. All right, so I understand this could, we'll just give everybody a few minutes because it'll probably take a while to download depending on your internet connection. And again, feel free to use these. We'll continue this at 6:37-ish. Hopefully you can download it by then. So any questions so far about anything we've talked about? You can always unmute or type it in the chat. And if your downloads are done, you can always type them in the chat as well, so we know. If you already have it downloaded beforehand and you already have Git installed, that's great as well. All right, so don't go through the installation yet. We're gonna go through this live. So once you have it downloaded, you can just type it in the chat so I know. And you can go ahead. Yeah, so we'll walk through the installation. Don't you have to worry about it. All right, cool. All right, seems like we'll just get everybody. We'll give everybody till 6:36. And once you've downloaded it, you can just launch it and hopefully you should see the same thing. Git, I don't think I can make this bigger. So Git 2.3, Git 2.33.1 setup. That's the version we're going to be using today. All right, so once you have this downloaded, you can just launch the file and hit next. So we're mostly going to be using like standard Git installation. But what we want to do here is we want to go down here and select Notepad as Git's default editor. If you have VS Code installed, you can use that as well. But for the purpose of this workshop, we're just going to use Git Notepad as our default editor. And it's probably just very easy to use as well because everybody's guaranteed to have it. And once you select use Notepad as Git's default editor on this window, it's near the bottom. We're going to hit next and let Git decide. Git from the command line, also from third-party software. Use bundle open SSH. Don't have to change anything here. Check out Windows style commit, Unix line style endings. Just pick the first one on this page. So once you're done that, just click next. Use Windows default console window. And for default behavior of Git Pull, you just want to go with default, which is the first option. And this is important. We want to use Git Credential Manager Core. This is a new feature. So if you already have Git installed, you might want to update your Git right now because we're going to be using this. And to update it, you just download it and the installer does it by itself, right? Enable file system caching. All right, so enable experimental built-in file system monitor. We want to keep that checked as well. And you guys can go ahead and install. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do that. And once you're done, just type that in the chat as well. It should take a minute to install. And if you had any questions, I know that was a lot of steps. You can always unmute or ask a question in the chat. Yeah, sure. If you're on Linux and all right, so adjusting the initial name of the branch. All right, so let Git decide. That's the one we're gonna go with for now. You can override it if you want. We don't usually do that, but some companies and some workplaces have a specification that they want for their branch names. That's when this is useful, but usually just let Git decide. And yeah, Parsa, if you have Linux, you probably already know how to use command line, so go ahead. It's the same commands on Linux and Windows if you install Git using this way. So are people able to complete the installation? And just type done or yes in chat once it's done. So we know that people have it installed. It's updating, cool. And now we're probably gonna get into probably the hardest part of this workshop, which is using command line. If you have not used command line before, this will be a nice small introduction. So we're just gonna split our screen real estate. Hopefully you can see both. So the way you do this is you just go to search and type in CMD and command prompt, which is the first thing, right? Seems like people are finishing their setup. And yeah, so just to confirm, once you're done installing, you can launch command prompt and type this into your command prompt: git --version. And once you hit enter, it should display this: git version 2.33.1.windows.1. That's the version name. And if you're able to get that far, you can just type that again as well. This is going to be pretty interactive workshop, so it might go a little slow. Are people able to get to this part? Git -- version. Yeah, parser. So if you're using the one built into, if you're using the one built into Bash or Linux, it might be an older version. You should probably search up how to update it. Yours is 2.30. All right, I think interesting. 2.30. So if you use this setup, it should be 2.33.1, but I'm on Mac and I'm still able to get this far. Will I run into problems? Nope. If you're able to get this far, you will be perfectly fine for the most part. All right. So Greyhound, did your Git installation complete successfully? So all right. Interesting. Did you restart command prompt and try this again? Ooh. All right. I wonder. So usually if that happens, you're on Windows, right? And yeah, I think that's like that error message from Windows. You might have to restart your computer, which is like the worst. Yep. Shishank or Gordon, you guys can help out. All right, so if people are able to get to this part, type in git -- version, and if it shows up here, if something shows up here, you're probably good to go. And we're gonna continue to the next step of this workshop. So now we have now we're just gonna go through basic commands. All right, so there's many basic commands. So one of them is git clone. So what I would like everybody to do right now is go to, you were invited to the repository. This is the link. And if you go here, what you want to do is click this code icon and copy our workshop URL. So HTTPS, and just click this copy button over here, right? And the command that we want to use here is git clone. All right. So if you type in git clone, and just remember to note down this directory over here. This is where it will clone the repository. So if you just use git clone, that's one way to use it. So you just type in git clone and the URL of the repository that you're trying to clone into your local hard drive. Once you do that, it will start cloning, and our repository is pretty small. And if you go to that folder, so I'm in C/user/Omar. You might or might not be able to see that, and that's the same folders over here. We have our workshop folder. So it cloned our in that directory. It cloned our workshop repository. So you can see we have a readme.md over here, and we also have a readme.md in our repository, right? Once you have that, You can also type in the chat. You got this far. Once you have the workshop folder cloned locally, you're able to proceed to the next step. All right, so you guys are trying to help Grey in the chat. All right, so once you have that, once you have the repository clone locally, we're going to do a little bit of work with branches. So a few people have their repository clone locally. So as we talked about before, when people work on new features, they branch out from their master branch. So we're right now on our main branch, which is the same thing as a master branch. So what if you want to create a new branch in Git? There's two ways to do this. So one of them is git checkout -b. So checkout basically changes branches in Git. So let's say you're working on your main branch, now you want to work on feature 1. You would do git checkout feature 1. But if you want to create a new branch at the same time, what you can do is git checkout -b. -b indicates that you want to create a new branch. You would, let's say, do feature 1, right? Important thing, cd, so just type in this command once you clone it, cd workshop. So this will change our active directory and command prompts to the workshop directory. Right now, just change to c user /omar/workshop, right? And now we can run our command. So git checkout -b feature 1, right? So it created and switched to a new branch called feature 1 at the same time, all right? And let's say we want to go back to our main branch. What we would do is git checkout main, right? So switch to branch main, right? And that now we're back to our main branch. And now we're going to go through making our first commit. So as Bob and Sam found out and while doing their construction work, once you do a little bit of work, you want to commit it. So you have a checkpoint basically. And to make a commit to our active branch, we need to make some changes first. So what I would like you to do actually is go to your workshop folder and create a new file and name it with your name. So my name is Omar. I'm just going to name it omar.txt, right? And it's in there in omar.txt. Hi, this file is created by Omar, right? And just save it, Control S. And once you've done that, you can exit Notepad and the file will be here. Once you have done that, what you can do is you want to commit that change, right? You created a new file. You want to commit that change. What you would do is git commit, that's the command. Git commit -a. The -a means we want to commit all of our changes. So the A stands for all. So -a and -m. And the -m says that we're providing a message, a commit message, which basically, let's just say you want to create a label for your checkpoint. So you know what that checkpoint means. Let's just call it here first commit. So once you have -m, you want to take a space and double quotation marks. And inside those quotes, you want to give your message name. So we're going to use first commit. And once you do that, once you hit enter, right? So it's going to say that you have an untracked file, right? Which means that you created a new file, but Git doesn't know what to do with it yet. And there's many different ways we can fix that. So before we do all of that, let's talk about a different command, which is very important to use in Git. It's called Git Status. So Git Status prints, so Git Status will print the current status of our repository and the active branch. It displays errors or things you should do to fix errors. It sometimes suggests those as well. And right now our branch is up to date with our origin repository. Origin in Git just means our remote, so our internet repository, which is on GitHub. So both of them are the same right now. That's what it's saying. And nothing added to commit, but untracked files are present. So every time you add a new file to a repository, can you scroll up? All right, so do you want to say something specific here, Jayesh? All right, so right now it's saying that there's an untracked file called omar.txt. Okay, so I hope hopefully you're seeing the same message as well. So over here it would show that your name.txt, that should be your file name. So Git status shows different status messages depending on the status of the repository. And what we want to do is we want to add these files. We want to tell Git that we want to add these files to our commit, right? So what we're gonna do, there's different ways of doing this. So the command that's called Git Add is useful for this. So Git Add dash capital A, the capital A is important. What this one does is that it adds all of the files, all of them, to our commit. And once we do that and do git status again, now our file is in green and it will tell you that it's a new file, right? So changes to be committed, we're going to add a new file. And for me, it's omar.txt. For you, the name would be different, right? And if you want to remove this file from the staging, let's say you added it by mistake, Git actually tells you, it's very helpful, right? Git restore dash that staged and the file name. So omar.txt, if you do that, it would go back to its original status, untracked file, omar.txt, right? And you can add each file individually as well. So git add omar.txt. Right, that's another way of doing it. Instead of using -a, which adds all the files, you can do is file by file. You can really fine tune what you add to your commit. So let's just add omar.txt. And let's try the same thing again. Tell me if I'm going too fast or if you want me to go back and catch up on something. You can always type that in chat as well. So once you try git status again, it's back to how it was before. So changes to be committed, changes to be committed. It added omar.txt to our commit. And now we're gonna commit again, and we're gonna use the message called, we're gonna use the command called git commit -a, so commit all of our changes, and -m, we're gonna give it our message again, first commit. That's our first checkpoint, right? So we're gonna call it first commit. You can call it anything. So git commit -a -m. So the -a means all our changes. So also omar.txt will be committed. And -m basically means we're giving Git a message to associate with this commit. And the message here is first commit. And when you hit enter, once you hit enter, first commit, it will tell you what changed. So one file changed, one insertion. And that's because one file change means one new file. And one insertion is indicating the fact that we only have one new line in this commit. So one new insertion. And created mode, we don't have to worry about that. That's a different name for a file in Git. Right, so are people able to get to this stage? You guys able to commit? If yours says 6 insertions, that's fine as well. There's probably something going on with formatting in there, but as long as you're able to commit, that's fine. I don't think the insertions. So create mode, I haven't really delved deep into that one, but I think all it means is that Git assigns an ID to a file and it calls it a mode. And that's the number you see here. It will use this to track this file internally, I think. I think that's what it's for, but I could be very wrong on that. You could Google that after. It's not, that message isn't that important because most people just don't look at it really. All right, so I see a few people are able to get to this part. All right, so now what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to push to this repository. So we're going to try to push to our remote repository. All right. And to do that, the command is actually very straightforward. You just do git push. All right. And once we do that, so for me, an authentication window usually comes up, but it didn't come up this time, and I haven't been able to make it come up again. Basically, what you're gonna want to do is when the authentication window comes up, you're just gonna want to sign in using the browser, like authenticate using your web browser, and it will just open up a window in your web browser, and you can type in your password to authenticate it and just allow access to Git. And hopefully, we'll start seeing some of your commits on the repository. So mine's up, omar.txt. Hopefully, we'll see some of yours as well. And if you haven't been able to get to this part, you can let me know. We have moderators in chat that are helping out. And just to repeat again, once you do git push, an authentication window should come up, hopefully. And in that authentication window, you can just sign in, authenticate using your web browser. And once you click that, it should just take you to your web browser. You can sign into GitHub and hopefully everything should go smoothly. I see Abdullah was able to commit. All right, folks, let's try to see some more files on here. I added my text file, but when I say git status, it says ds_store. Are you on Mac, Jayesh? All right, so you don't have to add the ds store file. That might be a Mac thing. Just add the file just add the text file with your name on it, right? Just add that file. The ds store is probably just a Mac thing. I don't think I added. So do you have a file that has your name in it? Like omar.txt. You have a file like that? So jayesh.txt, something similar on Mac, right? Right. You'd have to pull these changes before pushing. All right, so yeah. So what you would want to do is so Abdullah committed his text file. Okay, what's this? All right, so yeah, parse. So that's why I recommended that everyone update to the latest version, because Git doesn't let you use normal usernames and passwords anymore for some reason. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we recommended that you update it to the latest version. That's why. Yeah, sorry about that. You could try creating a personal access token. We actually have a slide for that, but we didn't show it this time. You can just Google how to do that. Yep, so you can type in git update in the terminal to update it. All right, so now that Abdullah has committed his change, what we would need is for everybody to pull this change now. And that brings us to Git Pull. And before we do Git Pull, actually, we want to do Git Fetch. So Git Fetch basically synchronizes your local repository with the remote repository. So if you type Git Fetch, when I do it, right? And let's try Git Status again. Now I will say that your branch is behind origin slash main by 2 commits and can be fast forwarded. And Git Fetch basically checked, and so Abdullah created a commit, and let's look at our commit history on here. So it lets you check, right? So this is the latest commit. So Abdullah made 2 commits, right? So before we push changes, it's always important that we do a Git pull first. And to do that, it's pretty simple. All we just do is Git pull, right? And once you do that, you should be able to see Abdullah's text file here as well. So Abdullah, that's his text file. So if you're getting errors while pushing, just run a Git fetch and a Git pull before pushing. And hopefully that should get more people should be able to commit that way. So far, only Abdullah has committed. So we're running out of time, so we're just gonna go through. You don't have to worry about Git merge that much this time around because it's a pretty advanced topic and there's many ways to go about it. So we're just gonna do a very small example with the Git merge. So Git merge, like we talked about, right? Like with the house example. So let's just say in code, let's just see what this will look like with the code file. So let's just say omar.txt, right? And we're just gonna make a change here. So anything, change, and I'm gonna commit this. We're gonna call this merge test. That's what we're gonna call this commit, and that's all I changed. So, right, and we're gonna commit this change, right? And we're gonna try to change the same line, but we're gonna do it locally. So let's just say another person did that change on GitHub and test, right? And we're gonna want to commit this as well. So our usual command, we're gonna use git commit -a -m second commit, right? So that creates a commit called second commit. And once we have that, we're gonna try to fetch again to update our repository. So git fetch, and if you do git status again. So now we have 1 and 1 different commits each. So remote has a commit that I don't have locally, and I have a commit locally that remote does not have. And that makes sense considering what we did here right now, right? And if we try to do a git pull, right? So there's a separate change. Omar.txt on a remote repository looks like this. So hi, this file is created by Omar, change. And locally, it looks like this. So hi, this file is created by Omar test. And they're both changed on the same line, right? And once we do git pull, all right, so auto merging, it tries to merge them. Sorry, what was the purpose of fetch? So the purpose of fetch is to update. So whenever you make changes remotely, Git does not automatically know that the remote repository was changed. And what Git fetch does, it basically fetches the remote changes and applies them to our local repository and updates the information. Did that make sense? So if you add a new file, someone else adds a file to workshop, right? And our local Git repository doesn't know about that. So when you do Git fetch, it just fetches changes remotely, and the local repository will now know that there were changes made through the remote repository that we need to pull, right? Right, so now we have a conflict. How does that look like? So if you just relaunch this file, it should have interesting stuff in here. So so it doesn't change the local files. It Git pull will change local files if there were changes, because Git tracks those changes, and if the remote repository has changes in local files. Oh yeah, you misunderstood that question. Yeah, so Git fetch does not make changes to local files. Only Git pull will do that. Yeah, that's correct. All right, so this is a little bit, if you haven't seen this before, it's a little complicated to understand. So it's basically saying that it doesn't know which one to pick, right? So our local repository, it uses head for that. This is the change that we had locally, right? And this is and omar.txt remotely, it looks like this, right? So this is what it's saying that it found remote, and it couldn't merge those, right? It doesn't know which one to select. And what it's asking us is basically to select. And we can do that quite easily. So let's just say we want to create a remote change. We literally get rid of everything else, all of this random stuff, right? And we save the file, and we go back, and if we try Git status again, right, it will tell us that you have unmerged paths, fix conflicts, and run Git commit, right? Or if you want to abort, you can just use Git merge dash abort. And we're going to use the same command that we've been using before. So git commit -a -m and merged commit. All right, we're just going to call it that. And now our files are merged. So if you try to launch this, if you try to reload this file, right, that's what our file looks like. And a very handy way of checking your commit history is git log --one line. So this is our commit history, all of the commits we've done. So we start off with first commit. These are commits we did before for testing. So first commit, Abdullah added the file, merged branches. This is our merge test, right? So this is the commit we did over here, so merge test. And second commit, that's the one we did locally. And then we merged those in this commit. So did that whole example make sense to you guys? I'm sorry, we're a bit over time. I'll stop sharing my screen because that's kind of all we wanted to go through today. And I understand that it was a little rocky because there were some technical issues. Oh yeah, for sure. You can stick around if you have questions.
Yeah, just another thing before we wrap up as well, just something we wanted to show. One second, let me share my screen as well. So outside of the commands and stuff, something that's pretty cool that GitHub also offers is the GitHub Student Developer Pack. And usually they promote this a lot at the hackathons and stuff, but the GitHub Student Developer Pack is a very useful sort of tool that GitHub provides, where there's two like sort of teaching elements to it. So you can either have like an intro to web dev component or a virtual event kit, and they basically give you a bunch of things that are related to web dev. So DigitalOcean license, GitHub, a couple other things, and in the virtual event kit, whatever is related to design tools, design elements, stuff like that. And it's a package that you can get for free, that's offered by GitHub for free. And they sort of give you subscriptions to a bunch of different websites that you potentially want to use in your own projects and stuff like that. Some ones that are actually pretty cool that I found are the Namecheap one. So Namecheap is used to create domains. They give you one free year to create a .me. So if you have a personal website, so in case for mine, it would be shashanksuresh.me, you get a free domain for 1 whole year. There's Adafruit. So Adafruit is the company that makes Raspberry Pis. So if you're ever working on a hardware project, with the GitHub account, you can have some discounts when you're buying hardware products from Adafruit. And finally, a Canva subscription as well is also pretty cool. So if you're ever working on some design projects, Canva is commonly used. So yeah, I'll be sending a link to this in the chat as well. But yeah, with that, we're gonna wrap up our event. Omar, do you want to do questions in the events Discord, or do you want to keep it in this Zoom call?
I'm sure. I think we're going a bit over time, so we should just advertise
this
the
up.
events Discord. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Abdullah, this gives GitHub Pro for free as well if you're a student. So all your time as a student, you get GitHub Pro for free. With that being said, something else as well, we're going to be having our next event on November 10th. I know a couple of us dropped off the call already, but let me just send a link to the event if you would like to register for that. It's going to be a talk instead of a workshop. We have a guest speaker, Tammy Bakshi. Some of you guys might know him, but he is a LinkedIn top 25 influencer, a best-selling author, over 300K subscribers on YouTube. He's IBM software engineer advisory on the advisory board. So he has a lot of accomplishments under his belt, and he's only done all of this while he's 18 years old. So it's going to be a pretty interesting talk. Please try and make it out if you have some time on November 10th. I'll send a link to that workshop. 1 second. There's a link to the event. And finally, if you guys want to join us for questions, I'm sending a Discord invite. Please click on that invite and join the channel. And there's a little section that says help rooms on the left navigation bar right here. So this is the events Discord whenever we have events. Just click on this voice channel and it'll create a voice channel where you can ask questions if you have anything related to this workshop in general. Let me grab an invite link. Cool. See you guys there. With that, I think we're good to wrap things up. Thank you guys for coming out.
Yep. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Have a great night.